This session is titled The Roles and Responsibilities of a PBIS Coach, and we're glad that you are here with us. Happy Friday. We're going to, an hour is not a lot of time, so we're going to roll along. So my name is Cynthia Richards, and I am joined by my esteemed colleague and project manager and everything person, my DJ and my producer, Beth Huertas, is here with us.
Hi, everybody.
We are joining you from Philadelphia. We both work on the Pathways to Positive Connections team at PHMC. We're here in Philadelphia, and we are excited to have this conversation with you this morning. So before we get started, we're going to ask a few quick things of you. Ask that you drop your name and your program name into the chat so we have a good record of who is joining us. And then, of course, we're going to remind you that it's really important that you practice self-care as needed. So if you need to stand, if you need to stretch your legs, if you need to do some deep breathing on the side, and whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, please do that. Most of us are not used to sitting for such an extended period of time. So whatever you need to do, please do that. And then we ask that you would post any questions or comments that you have in the chat. And Beth has promised to keep a close eye on the chat so that we can make every effort to answer any questions that you have. So welcome again. So the slides for this PowerPoint and some handy dandy handouts that we have prepared for you can be found if you have a smart device. If you'll scan the QR code on the screen, it'll take you right to a Padlet that we've created. I'm not sure if it's going to go to the original Padlet for the Coach's Day, but even if not, you'll be able to get to the handouts and the slides so that you can have it for future reference. And if you're familiar with the Padlet, we want you to bookmark it so you can get back to it whenever you need to in the future. I think we're going to lose our music. I thought so. Just want to remind everyone that the session is being recorded for future use. Make us all superstars on a Friday afternoon. We are glad that you are here with us. We are going to have a conversation. Hopefully it'll be a conversation about roles and responsibilities of a PBIS coach. Much of the work that Beth and I have done over the past 4 years or so has been focused on supporting program-wide PBIS providers as they are exploring PBIS, many of them for the very first time. And so this conversation, we were excited to hear that there are a lot of new coaches coming into the network, and hopefully many of them have made it. Hopefully you all are getting some new information if you're new to this PBIS work, but we were really excited about the news that a lot of new coaches are coming into the fold and exploring PBIS, process of implementing PBIS in their programs. And so that's right in our wheelhouse. So we are excited to have you. Our agenda, really quickly, we are going to talk through the many roles that a PBIS coach can play, depending on the size of your program, whether or not you're a legal entity with multiple locations, your parent organization. The roles of a PBIS coach can vary. And so we want to talk a little bit about some of the different roles, some of the overlapping roles that you might find yourself in as a PBIS coach. Then we are going to talk about what coaching looks like as a support for core leadership teams and administrators a little bit. We're also going to talk a little bit about coaching for classroom and support staff, which is slightly different, can be different from the supports that some of the other areas of a program might experience. And then we're going to talk about managing program data. We cannot get away from the data. Sue Zeiders reminded us that if we don't have data, then we're just another person with an opinion. And we don't want to be another person with an opinion. We need to back it up with our data. So those are the things we'll talk about for this hour together. So what are the various roles of a PBIS coach? And originally, the thought that came to mind for me, the picture I got when I thought about this topic, I thought about a cross between a juggler and a cheerleader. And Beth is laughing because, yes, the thought of that is hilarious and so true. As a PBIS coach, depending on the size of your program, depending on the many roles that you might be assigned, you certainly could be a coach and a teacher. You might be in, multiple other roles. And so the thought of juggling many tasks and responsibilities is one of the things that came to mind for me. That was the picture that I got. And then, of course, being a coach in any capacity means that we are the ultimate cheerleader. We are the excitement. We are the champion for this initiative in our program. And so one of the things that we want to highlight is that despite what our titles or our assigned roles are, we're always championing PBIS. We are always cheering on our teams, trying to build strong relationships with the people that we are coaching, whether it's at the building level or the program level, if we are in classrooms, if we are doing group coaching, whatever the format. I think the most important thing for us to remember is that our primary goal is to keep the PBIS energy alive and to remind everyone that, as a team, we keep going back to the drawing board and we just keep reminding ourselves of what PBIS is all about and what it means to be a program-wide effort to implement PBIS. So the two primary roles that a lot of the documentation will share are about the program coach and the practitioner coach. So I wanted to just touch on some quick working definitions of the two of those. So for a program coach, we're talking about somebody who is likely to be an external person, someone on the outside, not necessarily an inside staff person. And this person is going to provide technical assistance, support, and resources to help programs in their overall implementation of pyramid model. And so they are going to work to support the program at every level, at the leadership level. They are supporting coaches who might be pushing into individual classrooms. And so that's what a program level coach is primarily responsible for. A practitioner coach, or what we might refer to as a classroom coach, is going to be more of an internal person who is providing that direct coaching support to a staff person, to classroom teachers or other program staff in the use of pyramid model practices. And then I have on here coach facilitator, because very often if you find yourself working for programs or connected to programs that are on the smaller side, you may also find yourself in the role of a facilitator for PBIS. And so if you've been approved or given the go-ahead by the PAPBS network, you might also find yourself in that role as well. There is a resource shown on this slide that you will also find in the handouts. It's a new resource from the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, and you can check that out later, but it really does a nice job of breaking down the difference between a program implementation coach, so that program coach kind of overall implementation at all of the levels, versus a practitioner coach or more of a classroom coach. And I would, if you want to pop in the chat, which role you find yourself in. If you are a program coach, just type in program coach. And if you're a practitioner coach. And if you are both, then put both. And as we move along, looking at the supports that a program coach would be offering to a leadership team, what some of the responsibilities would look like for somebody who finds themselves in that role.
Cynthia, it looks like we have lots of people with dual.
Uh-oh, you're muted, Beth. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I hit the button, it just didn't go. It looks like we have a bunch of people that are doing the dual role of being both the coach and facilitator.
Okay, all right. Well, we know that role very well. So as a coach who might have the luxury of working at the program level, you'll find yourself working really closely with the administrators. And if you are the PBIS facilitator, then you'll find yourself working with administrators. If you're not the facilitator, then you would also find yourself working with the person who's assigned to be the PBIS facilitator to really start to put together your initial core leadership team. So you are putting feelers out there. You are, again, the cheerleader. So you are helping people to understand the value of having a seat at the table to be able to talk about what's going on at the program level and to really actively participate in some shared decision making at that level. You will also be the person oftentimes to make sure that meetings, core leadership team meetings and other meetings are staying on track. So you are creating agendas and meeting minutes or the template for these things. And you might be following the tips process to make sure that your meetings are running efficiently, or some other process of just making sure that you have a well-developed agenda to stay on track. You will find yourself actively participating, and this is something that's really important, that program coaches are active participants in the core leadership team meetings. You are, even in those meetings, you are modeling and you are helping to make sure that there is a shared voice and that everyone is having an opportunity to have their voice heard and participating and making sure that they're able to represent all of the different areas of the program. And so we look to the program coach to actively participate, to set that example, and to encourage those shared conversations, making sure that nobody really gets to hide out, but that all aspects of the program that are represented in those meetings actually are heard. You're also, and this is a biggie, you will be very instrumental in helping the core leadership team to complete their benchmarks of quality. If it's your initial benchmarks of quality, you may be introducing it and helping folks to understand that the benchmarks of quality in program-wide is really the driving force for implementation of program-wide PBIS. And so starting to create conversations around what benchmarks are in place, what the critical elements are, just really familiarizing maybe a new team with what the benchmarks of quality are and how they'll be used as you move to develop an implementation plan. I can't say enough about the resources and support that a program coach, all coaches, I mean, we are resource and support people. This is kind of what we do. But a program level coach is really going to be responsible for providing those resources, providing support to the team related to pyramid model implementation guidelines. So helping to make sure that we are using a fidelity lens, helping us to stay on track with the implementation plan, remembering the importance of establishing a mission statement and establishing some shared expectations amongst the team to keep everybody on track so that we don't lose tons of time in meetings that turn into free-for-alls. And so the program level coach is going to be really instrumental in helping to make sure that we get to the meat of what it is that we need to get to so that we can provide the supports and services to the children that they really, really need. And then, of course, training and supporting classroom coaches is a major part of what a program level coach would do. And so even if you're a facilitator, if you find yourself in a role of being a program level coach, and there are practitioner coaches in your program, you are going to really be a major source of support for those coaches to just help make sure that you are checking in with them as it relates to their coaching of teachers and staff around pyramid model practices in their daily work. And again, remembering to keep that fidelity lens. So helping to remind them the importance of using the fidelity lens and then thinking long-term in terms of, what systems do we need to put in place to prepare ourselves for sustainability. As a program coach, you're also going to update if you are interacting at the state level with the state leadership team. It's the program coach's responsibility to keep the state level folks in the loop about what implementation efforts are happening at the program level. And so this is how the state leadership team knows exactly what's going on and what kind of progress is being made. So one of the things that we want to remember is that this process is ongoing. It's not something that happens. It's not a one and done type of situation. So the program level coach is going to support the teams with creating implementation plans. We're going to look at things like professional development and maintaining or establishing and maintaining strong relationships and communication, not only with staff, but also with families. So really pushing to have a family member represented on the core leadership team. And then I heard people talk about some of the turnover that they experience. And so, this process, having the support of a program level coach to make sure that we can keep our core leadership teams vibrant and engaged and making sure that areas of the program are met is something that will happen. And it's like a cycle. I don't know that it actually ever ends. And in that process, obviously, we are creating implementation plans and we are continuously monitoring and looking at program level data. And so we are using a data lens for everything. And so we want to make sure that we are not just kind of talking, from an opinion point of view, but that we're also using the data to back up the decisions that we're making so that when there's a need for a staffing change or a need to engage some additional support, that we have the data to back it up. And again, this is something that happens and it continues to happen. And it's like a cycle that might not ever end because we want to make sure that we are revisiting what the needs are of the program so that we are actually meeting needs and not ideas. So these are some of the tools and resources that would be helpful to a core leadership team. I'm hoping that these are familiar to you. If not, no worries. I believe all of these, I don't know if all of them are on the Padlet, but we drew these right down from the NCPMI website. And so these are some of the tools that a program level coach supporting a core leadership team might find very helpful. So we have our benchmarks of quality, which again is going to drive the development of our implementation plan. And then our cultural responsiveness companion, which helps to make sure that we are using an equity lens, when we are looking at the benchmarks of quality. So it takes us a little bit deeper with some deeper dive conversations. And then here is our trusty dusty team implementation plan. This new updated version is actually a writable PDF. So if you have not snagged this one, you want to go to the NCPMI website and get this one so that you don't have to be a magician, and this one will do all of the hard work for you.
Cynthia, I think we can, if they're not on the Padlet, we can easily put them on.
We can add them. Okay,
yes.
Great. Awesome. All right. So now I'm talking about coaching classroom teachers and program staff. So now we're looking at those individuals who we would consider practitioner coaches or classroom coaches. And so some of the things, and of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but some of the major responsibilities of a classroom coach or practitioner coach is primarily using practice-based coaching to support the implementation model of PBIS. And so we are doing those, establishing those collaborative partnerships with our coachees. We are making sure to put the time in to set those relationships firmly, creating those trusted partnerships so that our classroom teachers trust that our coaching relationship is a safe place to talk about challenges, talk about areas of growth. And practice-based coaching, of course, takes a look at the coaching cycles and making sure that we're coming back with feedback, making sure that there's consistency with sharing feedback, and the observations that we are doing in the classroom so that we actually have data. Can't say enough about data. And so classroom coaches are using practice-based coaching as their coaching model to support our classroom staff. These coaches are also assisting staff with the collection of data. And so helping to learn how to use the behavior incident report system, if you're using the official BIRS, or if there's some other informal behavior incident report system that your program might use, this coach is going to help make sure that those forms are being filled out accurately and consistently, making sure that we are enforcing our expectations and that we are being very careful that we're not targeting, but that we are being consistent across the board with the way behaviors are being tracked, and collecting that data so that it can find its way back to the core leadership team so that we can look for things like trends and paying attention to how we're responding to behaviors in the classroom. A practitioner coach might also help with social emotional screening of children. And so if you're using the ASQ SE or some other DECA or maybe another social emotional screening tool, the coach in the classroom can actually help support a classroom staff with that. Classroom coaches are definitely doing classroom observations. So teapots and tippy toes, these are tools that we are gathering. We're going to need this data, especially when we start looking at fidelity. These are data points that are going to be needed to submit to the network. But the practitioner coaches and sometimes the program level coaches might also help support with classroom observations, these assessments as well, if it's necessary. But usually this will fall with the classroom coach. And then of course, training staff. So classroom coaches are in classrooms modeling, and they are doing side-by-side providing technical assistance and coaching of classroom staff, but also possibly training other staff, support staff in the program, making sure that there is consistency with program-wide expectations, not only in the classroom, but throughout the program building. And so we just want to remember that a coach is someone who's going to guide someone else to build new skills and competence and expertise. And so they're not necessarily pointing out they are walking alongside classroom staff. So the goal is to be very strengths-based and to look for growth areas, but to follow the lead of the coachee, identifying goals that they want to work on. And it really is a very supportive role. It's almost a sacred role. And so that collaborative partnership and taking the time to establish those strong relationships in the very beginning are so crucial to a successful coaching relationship. We pulled a few tools and resources that we thought might be helpful in this role. If you are coaching in classrooms, we have the teacher-coach agreement, which you might have seen. This is really going to lay out what a coach is pledging to offer and the supports that they are going to provide to a coachee, and then what the responsibilities of the teacher will be. So we'll talk about things like how often we will meet, what the coaching cycles will look at, and frequency, different items that might need to be addressed, just really making a commitment to the process so that we can hold each other accountable, and making sure that, there is some fidelity to the way that we're doing our coaching. And then this equity coaching guide is also very useful. It's another tool that asks some questions to really keep us on task, to make sure that we are using an equity lens when we are having conversations in our coaching, in our classroom, to make sure that we are not, again, targeting particular children who might, make it onto our radar, making sure that we are really consistent in the way that we are implementing the practices and strategies in our classroom. So I can't say enough about this equity coaching guide. And so we'll make sure that this also makes it to the Padlet. And then if you are starting a new, a classroom that is new to program-wide PBIS, this preparing for the pyramid is a really cool checklist that helps you to go into the classroom, you as a coach, and maybe something that the teacher can use as well, to just really walk around and take a look in the classroom to see if the basic foundational needs are being met in the classroom. Are the bones already there? And this gives us, a good jumping off point for some universal practices and making sure that our environment is set up for success before we even get started with trying to implement PBIS practices and strategies. Some other tools here. The implementation checklist, if you are familiar with this tool, you might take note that this is a newer version, a new and improved version. So we want to make sure that you get a chance to take a look at that. This will be useful. This is really helpful in coaching. It is in checklist fashion, which some people really like checklists. And so you can take this document apart and, go one page at a time, one section at a time, and really walk through at an appropriate pace, so as not to overwhelm a classroom teacher, but really to take one piece at a time and to look at what things are in place. This pairs very nicely with the inventory of practices, if you're familiar with that huge document. So this is also helpful to use alongside the inventory of practices. We have the action planning tool or action planning form. This too is a fillable PDF. So use this if you haven't already pull this down, to start to create your action plan when you're working with your coachees, to start to identify what areas, once you've had a chance to lay your eyes on the classroom, what areas that the coachee wants to work on. So what the larger goals are, then breaking them goals down into smaller, more digestible pieces. And this form is really helpful because it kind of forces you to be very specific in how you create your action plan, which is a recipe for success, when you can identify what materials am I going to need for this goal? When am I going to accomplish this step of this goal? How am I going to know if I've met the goal? And then what individuals might need to be involved in the process to help me to meet this goal. And so this action plan helps to keep the coaching team, the coach and the coachee, accountable to what we said we were going to do. So when we sit down to have those feedback sessions after an observation, working off of this action plan form is really helpful. And then there's the action plan checklist to make sure that the action plans are created really well and that goals are written in a way that set us up for success. So enough about those resources. Those you'll find at the NCPMI website. And then I think we're going to also make sure that we add them to the Padlet if they're not already there. All right, so managing program data. So this too is a role or responsibility of a PBIS coach. And actually managing data it falls in both areas. So not only a program level coach, but also a practitioner coach or classroom coach has responsibilities for managing data as a part of your coach role. So our classroom coaches, the data that we are working to make sure that we have a handle on, that we're staying on top of, are our BIRs. So our behavior incident reports, making sure that we are gathering them, making sure that they are being completed thoroughly and consistently, and that they are following whatever our classroom procedures are for documenting behaviors when there are behaviors to be documented. We're also making sure to keep a handle on our coach logs. Coaching logs is also data. And so when we as coaches are trying to be reflective to make sure that coachees are receiving the supports that they need, making sure that we are consistent in the frequency of our meetings, in the dosage of our coaching, having the coaching logs completed and tracking them and being reflective helps us to make sure that we are on our game and providing the supports that we pledge to provide in that teacher coach agreement that we took a look at. Also, teapots and tippy toes, we want to make sure that we are keeping a handle of on those pieces of data. These are really important for a whole bunch of reasons. Our teapots and tippy toes, we're going to use them in our coaching. This is really intended to be used for coaching purposes. And so, they are laid out in the way that, we're sharing them with our coachees and really making this a part of our action planning. And then this is something that we are tracking, and then also needing to move forward to the core leadership teams, so that when the overall program data is being looked at that table in those conversations, that we have a clear picture of what each classroom is doing, where the strengths are, if there are trends or needs across program that the core leadership team might need to create a plan to address. And so it's going to be important for our classroom coaches to stay on top of the teapot and tippy toes data to support not only the classroom, but also to make sure that the program level has what they need. And then any other classroom data that is generated specifically to the classroom. Are there other data pieces in your role as a classroom coach that you are finding yourself using in your work? If so, just pop it in the chat. I'm really curious. So we know we're tracking behavior. We are making sure that we as coaches are being reflective of the supports that we're providing. Anything else that you're seeing in your work? Okay. So now when we find ourselves working in the role of a coach facilitator, and I think several people on the call shared that they find themselves in that dual role. There is some overlap with the data that coach/facilitators find themselves in, but there are also some distinct data pieces that the facilitator is responsible for staying on top of. And so, and I'll show a slide in a few. I think it's a little bit forward, but we'll get to that. But the PBIS Early Childhood Database. And so as a facilitator, it's our responsibility to make sure that we are keeping that database current so that we are entering classroom level data and program level data to make sure that when someone from the state level goes into the database, they know exactly what's going on at each of the programs, things like children that are receiving, children who have IEPs, or if there are specialized supports that have been identified for children. Just the numbers of, in the classroom, changes in numbers, changes in classrooms. These are all things that as we, as facilitators, are entering this information in the database and keeping it current. Other people who use the database to know what's happening across the state, our state leadership can see exactly what's happening in our programs. Facilitators are also keeping track of team meeting data for our core leadership teams. That too is an area where we are paying attention to how many core leadership team meetings are we having? What kind of attendance are we getting? Are we having the kind of input that we need to make sure that the needs and the concerns of areas across our program are being represented? So that data is also important, and a facilitator would be staying on top of that data. Much like a practitioner coach, a facilitator is going to keep track of Teapot and Tippy Toes data, really making sure that we're looking at it at the program level though, and making sure that we have a sense of what's happening, what the trends are across the program. Staff surveys, program-wide behavior incident report data. So, any data that comes in that we're looking at across the program, the facilitator is going to want to stay on top of that. And then, of course, fidelity data. So we're going to talk about fidelity. This is a biggie. We had a conversation in the opening session about recognition and what used to be the implementers forum, and what a wonderful party it is to celebrate what programs are doing and programs that are reaching fidelity and sustaining fidelity, and that being an opportunity for us to really learn and celebrate these achievements. And so in order for us to get there, we have to make sure that we are staying on top of our fidelity data, that we are using it to take a look, most importantly, at what's happening in our program so that we are providing the supports where they need to be. We can't make changes to our programs and be sure that we are implementing changes effectively if we're not doing them using a fidelity lens. And so staying on top of our fidelity data is something that facilitators are going to do. These are just some examples of sources of data that might be collected. So we might be looking at a staff survey, excuse me, a staff survey. This is a sample of an initial survey, just to get buy-in and just to see how familiar staff members or members of our school community might be with PBIS and how they're feeling. This is a really good starting place. And then you're going to pull those surveys or other surveys in and keep a tally on how people are feeling. Are you reaching their 80% buy-in amongst your staff to move forward with the PBIS initiative? And so this is seems like a small thing, but it's really important when you are talking about taking on exploring and or implementing PBIS in your program. Sample of a behavior incident report form. And then here are the big boys, for lack of another way of putting it. So these are the items when we look at fidelity, these are the pieces we want to make sure that we are keeping track of, because when it comes time to submit for recognition, these are the pieces that will need to be in place. And so these are just kind of snapshots of the items that we want to be tracking throughout our school year, so that when it's time for us to submit them, or at the June 30th date or the December 1st or December 30th date, we make sure that we are not caught by surprise. So making sure that we are completing our benchmarks of quality at our core leadership team, making sure that our surveys of our classroom teaching staff are being completed, so that folks have a chance to talk about what supports they feel like are in place in the program. Teapots and tippy toes, preparing ourselves for the preset, the walkthrough that was mentioned. And this is, a heavy duty fidelity measure that when we are going for recognition, someone from the state level team is going to come out to the programs and do a walkthrough to lay their eyes on the things that we say are in place, and to really, kind of look to see the evidence of these fidelity pieces. And then as we are moving through the higher tiers of PBIS, we may be also needing to stay on top of the tier fidelity inventory, or TFI.
Cynthia, the one thing I was just, you were going over so many different fidelity measures, and I was like, I remember when I started out as a coach and then a facilitator, I'm a visual person, so I laid everything out on a calendar just so I could kind of keep things straight of when things were due, especially those data pieces when you are going up to those different tiers. That might be helpful, or even setting up a teapot or tippy toe schedule for yourself, just to kind of not feel so overwhelmed at certain times of the year.
Definitely. Beth, I don't know where I would be without my calendar. So thank you for mentioning that. Because these dates, in a day in the life of a coach, a teacher, a staff person, these items don't always make the top of your to-do list. And when you are managing staff shortages and, all kinds of other daily challenges, these things can easily get away from you. So that's definitely a word of wisdom to become familiar with the dates when these items are due, and then plug them on your calendar. So that they don't sneak up on you. And then, if we are using our benchmarks of quality, if we're keeping it current throughout the year and really revisiting it when we sit down to have conversations about implementation, and creating an implementation plan, these documents stay alive throughout the year. And it just makes it a little bit easier when it's time to gather those pieces to submit. The same thing with our teapots and our tippy toes. These are not necessarily required to be used right away, but as a coaching tool, that's where the power really lies. They are most helpful as coaching tools. And then if we're using them and helping our teachers to become familiar with these tools, they are handy. We have them, and then there's less anxiety about when someone is coming into the classroom to look for the very same things. It becomes a little bit more natural, I think. So here's the slide that is really just a kind of a little snippet of what the PAPBS Early Childhood Database looks like. This is almost like a home screen. This is where the facilitator, where the facilitator needs to make sure that the demographic information for the programs, for the classrooms in the program that you support are current. So it's going to ask questions about your classrooms and your classroom teachers and the number of children enrolled, and all kinds of specific information about classrooms. And once you're in the database, you go in, you're there, and then it's, a simple update. But this is one of the data measures that the facilitator is going to stay on top of. And then Here is our wonderful flow chart. This flow chart should look familiar. It may or may not look familiar. But when we talk about recognition, the network has created this flow chart, went to a lot of trouble to create this very elaborate flow chart to help us to figure out what levels of recognition our programs might be eligible for. And so there is a lot of information here, but the thing that I think is really cool about this document, and this actually is on the Padlet that we created, and there are links. So on this slide deck, the links are not, you can't click on them, they're not live, but on the Padlet they are. And so right up here, if you scroll or you toggle over this little purple box up the top, this is where there is a scenario generator. It's a Google form that if you are not sure what level of recognition your program might be eligible for, it's almost like an exercise, like to test out what you have in place. And this handy dandy tool will tell you exactly what you would be eligible for, and then I believe what the steps are that you need to take to request recognition at that level. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe all of these purple, looks like purple print, these should all be live links. And so depending on the level of recognition you are looking to be recognized for, or level of fidelity implementation you're looking to be recognized for. This, as much as it's a lot going on this screen, I don't know that it could be any easier, because if you click on the links, the live links, they'll take you right where you need to go to find out what your program is eligible for, whether it's an initial tier 1 recognition or even participation. It'll ask all those key questions about the percentage of your scores on the fidelity measures, and it walks you through what you need in order to be eligible to be recognized for fidelity implementation at the 3 different tier levels and the ones in between. So tier 1 and then tier 1 sustaining and the subsequent ones. Is everybody familiar with, is anyone not familiar with this flow chart? Is this new to anyone? Okay. So you'll have this, if you haven't had easy access to it, you'll find this right on your Padlet, and the links are live. And if you put it somewhere and don't remember where you put it, now you'll be able to get to it easily and get ready for the next submission come June. So we included this information. This is pulled from, these are the different sections of the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovation, where you can find additional trainings. So there are virtual webinars, not live webinars. Sometimes they are unpacking coaching if you sign up for webinars that are upcoming, but there are recorded webinars and all kinds of articles and resources here that really help support coaches at every level. NCPMI is so rich with information and resources, and always coming out with new resources and updates. You want to sign up for the newsletter and they will send it right to your inbox. And you know, there are all kinds of things that coaches can use with their coachees in the classroom, all kinds of visuals and visuals, not only for the classroom, but also for home. And then really helping to explain how to use data to make sure that our decisions are data driven. And so if you're not familiar with some of these resources on NCPMI website, I strongly encourage you to check those out and bookmark them because they will come in handy. It'll save you a lot of work. They have thought outside the box on our behalf for a lot of things. So there's a lot less we need to do if we just kind of not try to recreate the wheel. There's even and I'm trying to remember what it's called, a community page. There's a tab on the NCPMI website where if you have created a tool that has been valuable in your program, in your work as a coach, there's a way that you can submit it to be approved, to be shared on NCPMI. And so there's all kinds of resources that practitioners and coaches have created, or core leadership teams have created, that are available to us. There's actually a tool that we've included on our Padlet that I believe comes out of Colorado. I could be mistaken about that, but it's on the Padlet, and it's a BOQ for coaches. So we have our benchmarks of quality that we use for our core leadership team looking at our program. But this tool was created to also provide some reflection and an opportunity to look at your coaching to see if items are in place, the things that are best practices in terms of coaching. And it's in a checklist form, so it could not be easier. And we made sure that that was on the Padlet for you as well. So check that out when you have a chance. And I think that's all I have prepared. And I know that was a lot. So I want to, open up for folks to feel free to unmute your microphone if you can, if you care to. Tell us, if this information was any of it new, any of it surprised you. Did you hear about things that you thought might be helpful? Anything. Love to hear from you. I know it was a lot of information. Some of it, I think, was what might have been review. If you are a new to the coaching process, hopefully it was useful. And even if it felt like a lot, the good thing about it is it's going to live on the Padlet. And so you'll be able to get back to it when you need to. And then one of the things that I think is worth noting is that even though there's like the breakdown between the practitioner coach and the program coach, we know in early childhood, nothing ever breaks down that cleanly. And so there's a lot of overlap. And so while some things might be identified as belonging to a program level coach or a practitioner coach, there's a lot of overlap. And so this was really just intended to give you a, kind of a high level overview of some of the responsibilities and the role of a coach implementing or supporting a program that's implementing PBIS. But we realized that, sometimes it's not that clean. It doesn't fit that neatly into a box. Any responsibilities that anyone on the call has found themselves dealing with that we may not have mentioned?
We're just getting a lot in the chat about saying thank you. This was a great presentation. A lot of wonderful resources. Some of this was review, but for some new coaches, this was a nice way to kind of get familiar with some of the coaching resources out there.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. I'm hoping that you will again, bookmark the Padlet and the NCPMI website to make sure that you can get back to the resources. You won't be able to use all of them at any one time, but it's really important that you are able to get back to them when you need them. Sometimes I will bury resources and then it takes forever to get back to find them. So doesn't hurt to pull them back to the forefront every once in a while. Well, I thank you all for joining us for this hour. I hope there was some refresher and some new value, depending on if this is a new experience for you. We popped our QR code for the slides and the handouts again, so you don't have to scroll back. And just in case you came on a few minutes after we showed it at the very beginning, this will take you directly to the handouts, and then also the Padlet for the slides for this presentation. So
and Tony, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Cynthia. Tony just popped in the Coaches Day playbook, so participants can see where they would like to go to after the break. And I did put in the link again to our Padlet as well.
Awesome. Well, we thank you on behalf of Beth and myself and Pathways to Positive Connections here in Philadelphia at Public Health Management Corporation. We were happy to be able to share this information with you, and hope that some of it you'll find useful. We have included our email address if you would like to continue the conversation, or if you're just curious about what our project does, or want to just check in, like to share with us some of the awesome things that you're finding in your work. We would love to hear from you. But we thank you. We hope you will enjoy the rest of the morning. Looks like some excitement. I know there's going to be some excitement in some of the follow-up sessions. I'm looking forward to some of the others. But thank you again for spending this hour with us. And happy Friday.